All right, we are live. Welcome, everybody, to the Gunner Technology Livestream, a weekly tech talk for non-techies and techies alike. I'm your host, Jerry Merkins. With me is CEO of Gunner Technology, Cody Swan. What's up, Cody?
What's going on? What's going on?
Not much, man. Busy. It's
Yeah.
busy times at Gunner Technology, but that's exciting. It's actually, I didn't even mean for this, but it's sort of the topic of the day for the live stream. But
Topic du jour.
the topic du jour, as they say in French. Let's go ahead.
What's the soup of the day?
It's the soup du jour.
That sounds good. I think I'll have that.
All right, let's go through the Country Store giveaway. You can sign up for the Country Store giveaway on our Facebook page. Country Store is a lifestyle brand for anyone who loves the outdoors. The winner this week is actually from ye old Northeast, from the Big Apple. We got Sally D from New York, winning herself a Country Store hat and copies of our amazing ebooks. So, Sally, you got a couple of those heading your way. Enjoy those. And everyone else, sign up on our Facebook page for the Country Store giveaway. And while you're on our Facebook page, make sure to vote for the question of the week, which this past week, what was the question of the week, Cody?
The question of the week for the past week was, outside of work, do you use a computer other than a mobile or tablet device? And we checked in about 2/3 saying yes.
Yeah, last I saw it was sort of a runaway that people still use computers.
Yeah, which I don't know what they're using them for. I don't know.
YouTube?
I guess so. Maybe
as a paperweight.
Yeah, they're paperweight. And well, you know what's interesting is, and maybe we'll turn this into a series, is we're kind of looking into transitioning our office setup, our main computers. So we'll keep everyone informed on that, because we're
keep an eye out for that. I'm actually excited to get started. Mine just got here, so.
Oh, really? I haven't got mine yet.
I mean, hopefully it didn't get lifted.
Oh, I'm sure it did. I'm sure that
it's with your yellow truck. Somebody drove by and picked it up and then drove off.
I am sure the UPS man is devving up a storm on that.
he's gaming his heart out.
He's listened to our podcast and he knows.
Yeah, he knows exactly. Yeah. All right. Well, make sure to vote for next week's question of the week too, while you're on our Facebook page, and that question is.
And it's open ended. I realize I don't have to post an actual poll to have a question of the week. So
that's all right.
Yeah. Well, like, it doesn't have to. You could just kind of comment and say the answer, and that's kind of the same thing as clicking a button to vote. So I wanted to get away from the yes or no. So I'm going with, how many apps do you have on your phone, installed on your phone?
Installed, or that you use that are installed?
Installed.
Installed, period.
Yes. That's a good differentiator. But yeah, I just want to know how many are installed.
Man, I wonder, how many do you have installed on your phone? Not to skew the results.
Oh gosh,
hundreds.
I would say that's 100 is a good over/under number for me. Jeez, and geez. I think I use being like, apps that I use once a month is 16.
Yeah, that's about right. And of those, it's like the Pareto principle. And of those 16 apps, probably 2 or 90% of your app usage.
It's tough, right? So I use my phone as my alarm, so the clock gets used every single day.
Yeah, I think that's the app I use more than anything, the timer app.
My gym membership is on my phone, so I have to sign in with my phone, so that gets used every single day.
I still use a card, my wallet.
And then I use Todoist for chores, like a task list. And
messaging apps, I think I use the top 3 apps in I have everything in one folder called Nonsense, and the top 3 apps are Gmail, this app called Kakao Talk, and Messages. And I would say 97.8% of my app usage is those 3 apps.
Yeah, and I think most days I'll listen to Spotify at the gym on my headphones.
Yeah. I mean, it is nice, though, because even if you never use the app, it's nice to have it there. Like, I use Shazam probably 4 times a month, but it's awesome to be able to just pick out a song.
Right. Which, by the way,
4 times a month.
Not to get too far off field, but this makes a perfect case for what are known as PWAs, progressive web apps, which are apps, but that aren't separate apps. They're basically just conduits into your web browser that make it easy. They're like shortcuts for websites as opposed to full-fledged separate applications. And the fact that people are using 1/10 or less of the apps they have installed on their phone, and then at that 1/10, about another tenth is used
Yeah.
every single day, makes a really good case for progressive web apps.
I'm happy to get off track. Why aren't more people using progressive web apps now?
It's iOS. iOS is really they're the ones who hold it back. Apple being the ones who control iOS. So for example, if you go to, let's say you're on an Android device and you go to Fandango's website twice, like you go there 2 times to buy movie tickets. And Fandango's website is available as a quote PDA or PWA. PWA.
It should be available as a
display.
PDA. We should get to the point where there's just a PDA for every single app.
Yeah, public display of infection. That should be.
Yeah.
But so if you go there like twice, Android will say, "Do you want to install a shortcut to this app?" And then if you say yes, it puts an icon on your home screen, just like an app when you install from the Play Store. iOS, for example, you can do that, but you have to like know the steps to like add to home screen, name it, and kind of force it. And then of course there's some features that are lacking from iOS that are kind of crucial for true applications. So for example, I don't think that iOS supports push notifications from PWAs yet. So, it would suck to have Fandango on your phone and not get the push notification that the movie's about to start, kind of thing. So Apple is really the one. What's that?
Kind of.
Yeah, well,
what a useless notification. But
right. I'm kind of using the.
Yeah, I guess you're trying to like pigeonhole that example into
right, exactly,
negative.
Exactly. So,
yeah, I guess like an airplane app is good when you get notifications that your flight is late.
Right, exactly. And so just much in the same way that Microsoft held back web development for so many years with IE6 and IE7, Apple is really holding back mobile web development with their lack of support for some PDA.
Man, talk about the shooting on the other foot.
I know, it's weird. It really is weird.
What a strange time. But it seems like it's sort of the wave of the future.
Yeah,
which will be nice to not have to worry about. I mean, I guess it's tough for Apple too because they want the monopoly on the App Store, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's a huge moneymaker.
And the weird thing is, it's come full circle. It's really gone 360 degrees, because when the iPhone first came out, this was Steve Jobs' baby, and he did not want to open the SDK for the phone. He did not want developers to have the SDK. He said the way that we're going to develop apps, that third parties are going to develop apps, is through the web browser. He was set on that, and kind of like, it was one of the things that he actually gave on, because developers finally were like, we can do a lot. What's available via the web is not sufficient. So finally they caved and they opened up the SDK to third-party apps. But originally, the original intent was for iOS. The SDK basically was to be, through the web browser.
Crazy, man. It's so weird that it's come full circle.
Exactly.
Steve Jobs is ahead of the times, I guess.
Usually.
All right, well, let's dive in. We sort of gave a minor preview of the topic du jour. But the question of the day is, how do you balance working on multiple projects at the same time?
Man,
so it's tough. It's really tough.
And I'm doing that right now, as we almost always are. I'm doing that right now, and because I know toward the end of the week. So just so I'm not talking in a vacuum here, we've talked on the show previously about development iterations, and which is basically for us is 1 week of development work. At the end of the week, for everything that's in an iteration, we'll have a potentially launchable product. And now there's an acronym for that. I read it the other day and I almost cried.
A PLP, potentially launchable product.
Yep.
A PULP.
Yeah.
Right. If that's not an acronym, it is now. I mean, there's no barrier to entry for creating acronyms in technology.
Right. And so basically, by a potentially launchable product, meaning that you may not want to launch it because it's missing stuff that you wanted to have, but you could launch it in the fact that it is a perfectly workable product for the features that are there. So anyway, our iterations start end of day Tuesday and go to the beginning of Tuesday. And so basically, you and I are looking to pair up on a project. And so basically, what I'm doing is at the end of today, I'll have all my other tickets for the other projects in this iteration wrapped up. And so generally, the way I usually do that is, depending on how I'm feeling, I'll either set aside a day during the iteration for this project, or I will set aside hours in a day. This is for this project, and then this is for this project. And then usually I have an open-ended thing. And then if I have time left over in the day, or I feel like working late, then it will go toward this project, kind of thing.
Yeah, and I guess maybe a good starting off point would be the idea of weekly planning meetings, because I think those are crucial in terms of keeping tabs on all of the open loops you have, to use a getting things done term. But when you have a ton of balls in the air, you need to sort of have periodic reviews. And we found, weekly is easy enough because it's the same time every week. We do ours on Tuesday. Although with different clients, we have a client that we do one on Wednesday. We have another client we have a weekly planning meeting on Monday. So, you work around people's schedules, but you keep tabs on all of your projects, and then individually on each project, you keep tabs on that project itself. And you make sure that you don't forget anything. I think that's the most important aspect of staying on top of multiple projects.
Right. And I think what I generally do is, as I'm going throughout my day, speaking of another app that I use on my phone, I use just the bare bones notes app. So if I think of something, I just jot it down in notes, and then I'll move it into project meeting. We look at the backlog and say, okay, here's the backlog. What needs to get done this week? And sometimes that's with client input, where a client will have a high priority item that needs to get taken out of the backlog and put in that iteration. Other times it's kind of based on your best knowledge of what needs to get done. But the cool thing is, you're generally not planning out months at a time, because as we all know, priorities change. So really all you're doing is at that moment in time, you're taking things out of the backlog that are the most important based on whatever criteria, and putting it in that week's worth of work. And almost, if you do it correctly, almost all of those tickets will be unrelated to other tickets. So they won't be sometimes the client will say, I want this ticket done. And you're like, okay, well, in order to do that ticket, we got to do this ticket. Sometimes the client will say, I want this ticket done. And you're like, okay, well, in order to do that ticket, we got to do this ticket, and we got to do this ticket. But usually they're kind of siloed off enough where you can just pick them off and cherry pick them and get them done, kind of thing.
Yeah, and we talk about process a lot on this live stream. And we've sort of come to this over the course of years. And somebody just asked what project management software we use. We actually use something called Redmine, which we can't recommend highly enough. It really is. It's simple to install, which is huge. It's simple to use. It's free, which is nice. And it's a great way to sort of manage all of these tickets that we have, because we do have sub-projects. We have projects for individual clients. We manage basically all of the issues through Redmine. And like Cody said, we have this process laid down. Do we call it Agile Fall?
Agile Fall.
We coined that term.
Fall.
So yeah, it's sort of a combination of Agile.
But we need an acronym for it.
AF. It's Agile Fall AF.
It's Project Management AF. And if you ask the young kids what that stands for, they'll tell you something else.
Yeah, exactly. But basically, for certain clients, we have mapped out roadmaps for when tickets are going to get done, and it's sort of a prioritization. It's sort of a scheduling, but in any given week, you can reorder tickets. You can move a ticket in front of other tickets. You sort of have the ability to rejigger the schedule as needed, which is nice because you're only working on one thing in any given week.
Right.
One of the important things about managing multiple projects is to break stuff down into small enough chunks that you can move stuff around as needed. So, if somebody's going to be out for a week, you can plan for that, and you can figure out where stuff needs to go to make sure that you stay on top of that project.
Yeah, and coming up with an analogy is tough, because most other things that have to get built actually require step-by-step linear type things.
Yeah, you don't want the drywall guys coming in before the electrician comes.
Right. So agile fall is weird because it would be like, the analogy starts off as we break the project or the work of building a house into like bedroom or master bedroom, bathroom, patio, and so we lay it out in a linear tile that building the bedroom is going to take a month, and it's kind of done when you're done, kind of thing. We do it a little bit different where we bracket a month of time to build the bedroom. And then, okay, so then that means we have 4 iterations. So that means we need to have a minimum velocity, meaning like tickets closed, and we back into it that way. And we try to get out ahead of it. Like we try to beat the average velocity up front. So if for example, we really push ourselves at the beginning and get like 8 tickets closed, and then it turns out that we only really have to do 2 tickets in a week for the last 2 iterations, then that's fine. That's a lot better than saying, we need an average of 4, and then finding out you miscalculated in that last iteration, and then you have 16 tickets left over, and you've been going 4 at a time. So that's
especially because of the Donald Rumsfeld theory of software development, where you might come up against something in week 2, an unknown, that's going to eat up that entire iteration. So you need to have that leeway where you can pick stuff up in weeks 3 and 4 to catch back up. Because the stuff comes up all the time that you think would take a day to complete, and it takes a week or 2.
Right. Exactly right.
Yeah, so project management is the #1 key to managing multiple projects at once. I think another huge aspect of managing multiple projects, especially when you're managing multiple projects for multiple clients, is making sure communication is effective. So what are some steps we can take there, as far as it's not just keeping clients happy, it's keeping clients informed and, I guess, aware of the progress that's being made?
Yeah, well, and again, Redmine's good for that, because you have, especially if you do it like we do and you lay out you have the waterfall. This is where I really like the waterfall aspect of it, and you have like a roadmap. And so if the client says, hey, can we do this? The answer is always, sure, we can do it. The question is, what do you want to move to get this done? And so by having a visual representation of the roadmap that says this is 2 months, this is a 2-month project, building the bedroom is 2 months, and now you want to put in a cabana bath, we can certainly put in a cabana bath, but that's going to take a month. And so that's not just going to magically appear. We have to put it in somewhere, which shifts this 2 months. That holds clients accountable, that they can actually see there are consequences to interrupting the roadmap that they have collaborated on. It's fine. They're the client. They can certainly do that, but they have to understand that we're not wizards and we don't wave a wand and just stick something in a timeline, kind of thing.
Yeah. And I guess what's also nice too, that you sort of mentioned earlier, is the idea of launchable software, or what was it? What's pulp?
Potentially launchable product.
Potentially launchable products is nice too, because, if you want to throw something in front of something else, you'll see the results immediately after that iteration. It's not like you're gonna build stuff for 8 weeks, and then at the end of 8 weeks, here you go, here's all this stuff we just built. It's each week, while they're reviewing stuff that you just built, you're starting on the next phase of work to be done, and it's sort of a little bit of overlap between testing and development.
Yeah, and on that, the toughest part that I don't think anyone has figured out, and I'll go through how we try to manage it, but it's not nearly as successful as shifting whole projects. But when you finish an iteration, you have a potentially launchable product. However, to your point, the client, this is kind of, I think, one of the weaknesses of Agile. The client sees it, which is great in a lot of respects, but they get hung up on perfection and they start pixel pushing. You're right, this is launchable, but like, can we move like the sign-in form like 3 pixels to the right? And then we're like, sure. And then we do that in the iteration. They're like, like 10 pixels down. And they get so hung up on the pixel pushing. Like, it would be better if it's because you look kind of like you're going against the client if you say like, okay, but this potentially affects the timeline, because it's like, okay, how long does it take to move a form 10 pixels? It takes 20 seconds. That's not the point. And I think that's one of the problems with it. showing clients as you go what's happening, as opposed to being like, okay, here's the completed project. Now we're ready to pixel push.
Yeah, I that is a tough aspect of Agile, because you almost want to have just one functionality testing period, and then you have one design testing period, and then you have one what else do we need to add period, feature period maybe.
Right.
But it's tough to force people into that mindset of, like, you would almost want to schedule in a week of design fixes and a week of like brainstorming feature ideas, and then everything else is, does it work?
Right, right. So I guess the analogy there is like if you're inventing an automobile and you put the steering wheel on the right-hand side and you're asking someone to use it, and they're like, I really want the steering wheel on the left-hand side. And it's like, okay, awesome. But does it work? Does the car drive? Can you get to go to McDonald's? Can you pick something up? Can you get back? Can you fill up the gas tank? Can you turn on your blinker? But people get so hung up. Well, it's tough to tell with the steering wheel on the right-hand side. It's like, what do you mean? What do you mean? It's not. Just ignore.
Yeah, I guess that is a human foible that we can't ignore. We can't ignore those tiny details.
Right, right, and it's tough. And I get it, because I've been on the other end of it, where I've been looking at a product and something bugs me to no end, and it's a minor. What it comes down to is in some respects, yes, it's optimization, but in a lot of instances, it's just a point of preference, and sometimes that the point of preference is the client's, which means it has to get done, but it really shouldn't be holding up the project roadmap.
Yeah. How do you go about managing time estimations when you have multiple projects, and how do you make sure that your schedule is sufficiently robust to handle the amount of work that you have to do? I think that's one of the toughest aspects of managing multiple projects.
Well, I was going to say one of the really tough things about, from a developer standpoint of working on multiple projects, is, we've talked about this before, there is a zone that you get in, there is a momentum that you get while working, and it's not just pure working. You get momentum and you get in a zone on working on a certain project. Like, you can't carry that momentum over from one project to the next. Stopping and moving to the next project removes that momentum, and you're starting over from the beginning. So as a developer, you want to stay, your inclination is to stay in one project, and you're really loath to move when you're just knocking down doors. Even sometimes when, like, I'm really going on a project and all my tickets for that project are closed, and I have tickets from other projects that I need to get done, I have to fight the kind of desire to take tickets from future iterations and put them in this one, because I just want to keep going while I'm in the zone on that project. So what you really have to do is, number one, plan on that aspect where, like, let's say if you're working on one project, you can probably close, let's say, 20 tickets in an iteration. But if you're working on two projects, you can't just say, well, then I can close 10 tickets for each project. You've got to fight that, because crossing over resets the momentum. So you've got to say, well, then maybe I can close 8 tickets per project. And because you just really are so momentum based. And that's why, if I can, I like doing separate days for projects.
Yeah, if you have 5 projects, it's always better, I've found, to, like, instead of working on each project 2 hours a day in 5 blocks, like, work on one project 10 hours this day and do 10 hours a day on each of the 5 projects, as opposed to 2 hours a day on each of the 5.
Right, right. Because I mean, it's true. This isn't unique to web development or mobile development or engineering or software. Getting started is always the hardest part. It's always the hardest part. You are just jonesing to go, which sometimes you are. Sometimes I mean, not even sometimes. A lot of times you're like, I cannot wait to get in there and start working on this. But that's not always. And so the toughest part when you don't feel like that is just getting started. And then once you get in that groove, man, you can keep going. But you just have to bite the bullet and get started. So if you're trying to get started 2 to 3 times a day, you're wasting a lot of effort to ramp up each time you do that.
Well, and like you said too, once you have that momentum, you want to leverage it as much as you can, because each project is going to be different. You're going to be in a different mindset the features you're going to be working on are totally different. So, if you're building photo uploads for one app this iteration, and you're building or you're doing database optimizations for another app, I mean, those are two separate mindsets completely. So once you're in the photo upload mindset, you want to stay in that mindset for as long as you possibly can. You don't want to, do half an hour of photo uploads and then half an hour of database optimizations and half an hour of photo uploads. I mean, that's going to be a total waste of your time, and it's a total waste of your energy, because you're just going to have to be switching back and forth so much.
Yeah, and actually, something that I've done is a little trick that helps me out on that a lot is because obviously sometimes, like you said, if you're breaking up a project per week, the problem, or excuse me, per day for each week, the problem with that is you don't want to get in a situation where let's say there's 7 days in the iteration and you're working on 5 projects, then you don't have like 2 days for each project, so you actually have to get every ticket done in each day. And so what I do is, if I'm trying to do that and the day is ending, or I've just kind of lost it, I can't work anymore, I will make sure that I leave a ticket half done. So it just drives me so crazy knowing that it's just sitting there, that as soon as I possibly can, I come back and finish it. And really it helps the motivation, because I'm so motivated to fix it. And even if I have to go to another project, I'm actually motivated to get through what I need to on those other projects, so I can get back to that one ticket that is sitting there half completed and then finish it.
That's a tip from writers too. Like, I think Hemingway would stop writing when he knew exactly what was going to happen next, so that the next day he would come in the morning and be able to just sort of write out what he knew was going to happen, and then that would sort of lead him into writing what he didn't know was going to happen.
Exactly. That's the exact same thing that I kind of rely on.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great ramp to sort of get you back in the zone that you were in when you were sort of, in the zone and cruising.
Right, exactly.
Anything else you want to touch on as far as managing multiple projects? I get one of the a lot of it is covered by just project management techniques. Because I was going to say, one thing that's tough is managing personnel and moving personnel around different projects. But I mean, a lot of that is handled at the weekly meeting, where you decide who has what hours available, who's working on something that needs to be completed this iteration. I mean, the nice thing we talked about last week, being jack of all trades, the nice thing is that you can move people around as needed and have them sort of jump in on any project that sort of needs help. And I get one aspect there is the idea of code standards or coding standards, and sort of writing software the same way, so that developer A can jump in on project B whenever you need him to, because he'll be comfortable with the way the code's laid out, how it's written. So having standards for the way that you write your code is a great way to manage multiple projects, in that you can have any number of people working on it at any given time.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. We're big on this. It's like process, and it's weird because I think we're unusual, and so we're talking about like laying out coding standards, structures, documenting how things are deployed. Everything should be automated. By
automating processes, yeah, you got to automate as much as you possibly can.
So you basically just say, hey, developer A, if you're doing this project, just type let's go now on command line, and then the project's deployed, or whatever. You want to make as much as possible. But the interesting thing was, and I see developers claim, like, just bitch about this all the time, especially in React. So React is what they call an unopinionated framework, where you can kind of put files wherever you want. You can kind of do things wherever you want.
Name directories, whatever you want.
Exactly. And Rails, Ruby on Rails, is the opposite of that. And to stay in the JavaScript world, Angular is the opposite of that. They're opinionated frameworks. This goes here, you write this way. And unfortunately, Angular, we've tried it. It's just not as good for our needs as React. However, I think that we're in the minority, and I really like opinionated frameworks.
Yes, 100%.
Now, again, if you are a developer and you have a one project job, you are working at Bank of America, and your job is to, code their web app, I can understand an unopinioned framework is great, because you'd never have to work around the opinion. But if you are working in a lot of projects, an opinionated framework is a godsend sometimes, because you never have to explain to the development team how things are done. It's just the way the framework operates. So it's unusual, but if you're working in, it's another thing to consider. If you know you're going to be working on a lot of projects, you may try an opinionated framework first. Now, again, we're trying to turn React into our own opinions on what React should be, which is totally fine. But if we had been able to use Angular, we would have been able to remove a step of, okay, let's lay out how we do React, because there's only one way to do Angular kind of thing.
Right, right. The nice thing is that if you lay it out logically and it's easy and documented, you know, it's simple for somebody to jump in and help out, which is nice because, you know, we have a team of developers and designers who are constantly sort of hired guns, right? That they're sort of roaming project to project as needed, and a lot of the weekly iteration is figuring out where folks need to go. And another thing there is we try to get people involved in as many projects as possible. So, you know, it's nice to have folks working on one project this week, another project the next week, just so that they're comfortable with what's being built. And if it's crunch time, you have a month to launch something, you know, we've got a ton of features that we need to release. You can move, you know, 8-10 people onto a project at once, and they're ready to jump in because they know the project already.
Right, exactly. And then even then, there are projects where there's like domain knowledge, and that is not easily transferable. It's not easy. It's not easy to document. However, you don't have to, when you're all hands on deck. You don't need to put everyone on the domain specific part of the application. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of things that have nothing to do with the actual algorithmic part of the application, where there you do have one or two core developers on that project who understand the algorithmic portions of it. Now, they should do their best to make that algorithmic portion understandable, but it's just unrealistic to expect that someone comes into a project and understands the algorithmic portions of this. And when I say algorithmic portions, there's parts of, like, let's say you're working in the finance industry. And so the developer working on the finance app will know like the laws and regulations in the finance industry and how the app incorporates those laws. A developer coming from, say, a biomedical application, they know a lot about the biomedical industry, but to put them on the finance app, they're not going to know exactly the rules and regulations that have to be followed and how they're captured in the logic in the application. They'll get there, but they have to spend some time in the application. They just can't hit the ground running like that.
Yeah, and I mean, even there, as much as you can do to standardize variable names, methods, meaning like how stuff is stored. You don't want to store, you know, a deposit variable as X. You want to store it as a variable named deposit, so that people can actually somewhat read the code and at least get a head start on what it's doing, and then ask questions where needed.
Right, and not to get too far afield because we're gonna kind of lose everyone. But what I think helps a lot in the core business logic of an application is the thing that, you know, the terminology called immutable functions. And so basically, in a very easy to explain method is when you have a function like print my name, right? And so if you call print my name and you pass it a variable Cody, it writes to the screen Cody. And given that you pass the same variable, the same output occurs every single time. Like it's not dependent on the time of day, where if I say print my name Cody, it says Cody at 11:59 p.m. It says Cody every single time. And so that what they call is that side effect free. And so if you have functions that are side effect free, they're not dependent on any other code base. That helps understand the algorithmic portion of the business log of an application, because you have functions that do one thing and the name should be a description of what they do. And they do the same thing every single time.
Yeah. And that's huge. That's huge for being able to move pieces around as needed. And really balancing working on multiple projects at the same time, like so much in software development comes down to project management, resource management, time management. It's sort of the magic three. And we talked about that a lot on this show. So it applies just as well to managing multiple projects as anything else. But I think that's probably a great point to stop. So that'll do it for this week's episode of the Gunner Technology Livestream. Make sure to check us out next Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. You can find the associated blog post for this episode at gunnertech.com. Check out the podcast on iTunes and check out our ebooks on iBooks, Kobo, Barnes & Noble, Amazon, and anywhere else ebooks are sold. Head on over to our Facebook page to sign up for the Country Store giveaway. Country Store is a lifestyle brand for anyone who loves the outdoors. And while you're on our Facebook page, answer our question of the week, which is...
How many apps do you have installed on your phone?
I'm genuinely curious to see how many people have installed their phones. I know my siblings have hundreds. My siblings are like you. I have like 4. But we'll see what the range is. I'm really curious. It's becoming a mobile-first world, so I think people have apps for everything now.
Pretty much.
So head on over to our Facebook page, answer that question of the week, and make sure to check us out next Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time for the next episode of the Gunner Technology Livestream. I'm Derry. That's Cody. We'll see you next week.